Hello, my name's Andy. Welcome to episode 96 of The Ginger Pond Keeper. Right, so I'll start by explaining the title of this video, which is Safety Not Guaranteed. Now, as you may know, that's a film title as well, and it's a film about time travel. So one of the reasons why I've chosen it as the title for this episode is I'm going to be looking back at my pond, the previous two versions of my pond, what was good about them, what was bad about them, and what I'm going to do for version 3 of my pond, so looking forward. Now, it's also relevant because safety, as you may know if you've seen episode 95 and you've been following my channel for a while, is centremost to my thinking at the moment. And principally, how safe can I make things and how does that affect what decisions I make? Right, so let's start by looking back at version 1 of my pond. Now, apologies if you followed my channel for a while. The first 2 episodes of my channel were about my pond and how I got to the point I was at when I started the channel, but I will just do a quick recap for any new people. So, the first version of my pond, I had 2 carp and 5 rod in a fish tank. Well, they were my son's fish really, but they'd outgrown the tank. They were pretty happy, for want of a better, less human phrase, but they needed a bigger environment. So the options were to find someone who had a pond and move them on, or to make my own. Now, we had a relatively medium-sized garden with a lawn. Neither my wife nor I or anyone else in the family liked doing gardening and mowing the grass, so we were quite happy to get rid of the grass and put a pond in. Ironically, I'm thinking about reintroducing grass to the garden. I'm keeping the pond, but reintroducing grass around the edges, but more of that maybe later or maybe in the future. Anyway, so I made a pond, and to recap quickly, I'll talk about the pros and cons of the pond. The pros were, it was a healthy environment for the fish. However much I had to get to grips with pond filtration, I kind of understood the basics of keeping water healthy and keeping fish healthy, but there were obviously, it's complicated with a pond. I thought it would be easier with a pond, but I thought wrong, and it's actually more complicated, I think, than a fish tank in many respects, even though it's a bigger body of water. Anyway, the fish were healthy. I really liked the waterfall. I didn't install it very well, but I think it was really nice, and birds used to land in it and drink and wash themselves. And I like the lilies, which is why I've reintroduced them last year to the pond. And I like the fact I didn't have a uniform size of plants around the marginal shelf, and I had some rocks and things like that. I thought that was quite good. And it maybe looked a little bit more natural. Not really natural with a capital N, but it looked a bit better. Now, onto the negatives. Well, there was nothing level in that pond. So if you imagine this is the front of the pond and the water would be about there, at the back of the pond there'd be that much liner showing, which is pretty awful. And also the marginal shelves. The marginal shelves weren't level. In fact, they tilted in towards the pond, which is the worst angle for them to tilt. And so plants were falling into the pond at the first glimpse of a wind. There was a leak, a very, very slow leak, but there was a leak. I think it was around the waterfall. But yeah, there was a bit of a leak all the time. And this is the biggest problem. All of the pipework and all of the filtration was exposed to the elements. If the pipe wasn't in the water, it was in the open air. And that brings us on to the first catastrophe that's befallen one of the ponds I've had. And that was the beast from the east. So if you don't know, in 2018, I think January or February, I can't remember which, we had a prolonged period of really cold weather with lots of snow and ice, etc. And I got through most of it okay. I think I had in hindsight, I had about 24 hours left of the really cold weather, and my pond had done okay. About half of the surface of the pond had a thin amount of ice, but the return from the filtration disturbed the water surface and kept the other half of the pond clear, and the fish were doing okay. But I guess over time, ice was forming in the pipework around the edge of the pipework and closing up the gap that water could flow through, and eventually the pressure got too much and one of the fittings failed, and water was then pumped out of the pond. Not all the water, there was about 16-18 inches of water left, But the problem with that was no water was then going to the filter, and the filter therefore wasn't sending water back to the pond and disturbing the water surface. So the whole surface of the pond froze and then froze downwards. And there was no space really for my fish to escape, and the vast majority of the fish died. So my 2 carp died, and all of the bigger rudd, the rudd I had at that point, 5 rudd I spoke about, who are the grandparents of the rudd fry that I've got now, they all died. Now they had about 30 rudd fry and 14 of them died, and they are the parents of the rudd fry I've got now. 14 survived, and the tench survived that I had. So I thought long and hard, and then I decided on version 2 of the pond. And my aim with version 2 of the pond was to pretty much have the same kind of stocking and the same kind of pond, but put right all of the things that were wrong with it. So I made it level. Well, it's about 1 inch out now rather than about 6 inches out, but you can't see it on a pond like mine, so I'm fine with that. To make the marginal shelves level, which I did, but more importantly, to keep as much of the pipework and filtration out of the elements as I could. So really, aside from about 3 or 4 inches as pipework comes out of the water, it's all underground. Well, not really that deep underground, so not really to get away from frost, but it's about 1 foot, 18 inches underground, because I've got a walled area around the back of my pond that's got earth in and is planted, and the pipework goes through that and then into the shed. And then, as I said, I have a filter shed, so the rest of the filtration is indoors to some degree, not boiling hot in there, but it does the job. And since then, regardless of how cold the weather has been, I've not had any problems. So that kind of worked. And over time with version 2 of the pond, I added a skimmer, I added more filtration, I did a big overhaul of the filtration that you might have seen last spring, summer, and everything was going well. I had a few problems with parasites. I got some fish, I moved on some fish, but everything was good really. You know, it was a healthy environment. I added a heron net to stop herons getting in, which over the course of 3 years seemed to work. Didn't work with otters, as we'll find out in a minute, but it was going well. And the fish were growing and developing. The rudd that survived the beast from the east, the rudd fry, grew and developed and spawned themselves, which is why I've still got some rudd fry in the pond, and it was doing okay. Until, that is, as you may know if you watched episode 95, an otter visited my pond, and yeah, that was a bit disastrous. So I won't recap all of that, go back and watch episode 95, but it took all of my fish that weren't rudd fry, so all 14 rudd. I'm assuming the crucian carp, although I haven't checked, more on that in a bit, the tench and the 4 large carp. So all the fish were gone. And that brings me to a point of deciding what to do with version 3. And as I said in episode 95, I'm not going to do a version 3 in any meaningful sense unless I can improve the security of the pond and at least have a fighting chance of fending off otters. But there's also other decisions to make, and there's decisions to make about how I'm going to stock and what I'm going to stock. I know I want to stock with carp again, but what carp am I going to get? How big are those carp going to be? And this is where safety not guaranteed comes in, really. When I lost my original carp, I replaced them with carp that are actually a little bit bigger, a couple of inches bigger than the ones I lost. And that's because I just don't want to go back to scratch again and start from 6-inch carp again and grow them on. Not really because of impatience, but because, you know, I sort of learned you can't guarantee that, you know, these fish, everything's going to be safe forever and you're going to see the progression of these fish. Because what I wanted from a pond is, I think I've said this before, I wanted to take a lake you might find in the countryside, miniaturize it, stick it in my garden, and then watch wildlife do its thing. And in this case, fish and any other wildlife that visited the pond, but not frogs. But I wanted to see their progression and development, and I like the idea of having quite small fish and then growing them on. But I didn't really want to visit that, and there's a risk in that because something catastrophic might befall the pond. And then in 2018, it did, and I lost all my fish again. And that's what the situation I am now. Ideally, I've got those tiny rudd fry, and if I got small carp, I could start all that again, and I could look at my pond and do my filming based on it being, you know, where wildlife live and seeing their progression as they grow and develop, get more confident in their environment, behave differently, maybe start spawning. And that for me is quite interesting, and a lot about why I've got the pond and I do the filming I do and I do the channel. But there's always that risk that I could lose it again. I think, I addressed the cold problems that I had with the pond and the first catastrophic failure. I prevented a catastrophic failure by protecting from herons so far. Herons are wily creatures, and I can't assume that one heron won't work it out in the future, because they tend to. But I think I've done a reasonable job. And now the catastrophic failure I haven't been able to prevent, and an otter's got through. So I can put in those defences against that otter, but it may be able to get past them. And I will talk about what I'm doing in a little bit. But something else might befall the pond. And I might get to that point where I've got a really established pond and a really established fish, and it's a nice community of fish, and I'm getting some good knowledge of those fish and a good awareness of how they behave and good footage, and I think good videos. And then something might happen and I'll start from scratch again. And so that kind of led me to thinking, I'll just buy some really big carp. The fisheries where I got my carp from, VS Fisheries, sell fish up to 5 or 6 summers. Now, the last carp I got were about 2 summers. So you can imagine how big 5 or 6 summer carp are. They're between 20 and 30 pounds. And if you've ever gone carp fishing, or know anything about carp fishing, pretty big fish. I could just buy them, stick them in the pond, ready-made development. The problem with that is, well, it's twofold really. One, they'll look really disproportionate to the fry, which isn't really that important in the great scheme of things, but I don't like things being disproportionate. That's why I cut the plants back, for instance, because when they grow to their full size, as they would in the wild, as it were, they look way too big for my pond. So I'd like there to be a little bit of balance. And the other problem is that would cost a lot of money, and I don't know if I could afford it. And also, that increases the risk. Obviously, the biggest risk for me for losing all my fish again is I've lost my fish, I've lost my pets, as it were. But also there's a money implication there too. Now, the other plan, what I could do is I could get 1 summer carp, which would be between 1 and 2.5 pounds. And they would be utterly affordable. I could get 4 of them. And they would kind of be in balance with the rudd fry, a little bit bigger, a little bit older looking, but that would be fine. And yeah, that would be a really good idea. But again, I'll be starting from scratch again, developing the pond again, and something might happen. So, a difficult decision. I have broadly decided, and I'll tell you what that is in a little bit. First of all, though, I'll talk about what I decided to do in terms of protecting the pond. And that is, firstly, the back fence, so the garden fence. If you imagine that's my fence, and that side is where the field is behind my house, which is where otters get to my pond. And this side is my garden. I'm going to dig a trench down there, and it's going to be about that wide, and it's going to be 2.5, 3 foot deep, as deep as I can get it really. And then I'm going to fill that trench with concrete. Now, I thought of lots of materials like wire and mesh and wood and plastic and metal that I could put in a trench, and I think I'll just go with concrete because it's simpler, and in these days of rising prices is relatively cheap, to be honest. So I'm going to go with concrete, and that's what I'm going to do. It's a bit rough and ready, not very environmentally friendly, but I think it's probably the best way of doing it. And that, I think, and then I'll attach the bottom of the fence to that concrete, and I think that'll be a pretty good barrier against an otter. Now, as far as the pond itself goes, and if you're wondering why I'm doing the pond and the fence, it's really a belt and braces. You know, I'm not entirely sure the otter won't be able to get through that. They could gnaw through the fence if they're that desperate. They could come in the neighbour's garden and then through the side fences of my garden. I have got an idea about that, but I'll tell you that in a future episode. So it's not guaranteed. They could climb higher than, you know, documents and documentaries tell you they can climb. So I want to have a secondary defence, and that is the fencing around the pond. Now, if you've seen my channel before, I have posts in the ground around my pond, and then there's netting in between those posts, and then there's rope that's decorative, but that's there to stop herons, and so far I've done the job. As far as what I do in the future is I want to get something that would be resistant to otters. So I contacted a company that made meshes of all descriptions for fencing and said what I wanted, and they suggested 2 types of mesh. This is obviously steel mesh, and it was a reasonable price actually. So it's about 4.5 foot deep, so my fence is about 2.5 to 3 foot high, and so that would leave 18 inches 2 foot under the ground, and then I'd staple it to the posts. Now it would look ugly, and I'd have to work out what I do at the front where the gate is to make that secure, but I think it's probably a necessary evil, and I think between the 2 things would at the very worst slow the otters down, make it harder, make the risk greater for them, and make the likelihood of someone or my cats spotting them. I don't know if my cats would actually defend the homestead from otters, but they would certainly make a fuss, and that might alert us. So I think there's some benefit there in doing that, and I think that's about as good as I can do, short of building a building around my pond with foundations and things like that, which I don't want to do. And as I said in episode 95, I'm not putting anything across the surface of the pond. That would detract so much from what I'm trying to create with the pond to not make it worth it, and so I just wouldn't have a pond. So I have decided what fish I'm going to get. I'm going to get the 4 carp. I think they'll fit in with the pond better. I can do that journey of the fish through their life. I don't like the phrase journey, but it does kind of fit in this case. And I think it'll be really interesting. And yes, there's a bit of a risk that before I get to that point of having mature fish, that it will go wrong again. But I'll just do my best to prevent that. Safety's never guaranteed, is it? There's always risks in life, and you just have to take that chance and do what you think's the best idea. So that's what I'm going to do. But I don't know when I'm going to get them. So I've emailed VS Fisheries, which is where I get the fish from. They tend to harvest from, I think, late autumn and through winter, because they stock into fishing lakes. So they take the fish straight from a lake, that's of winter temperatures, and then move them to a lake that's at winter temperatures. So there's not those concerns sometimes you get when you buy koi about what temperature you move and stock fish at. So yeah, they harvest in the winter. I think they're still harvesting now, but I think it's the larger fish. So that might not help me. So if I order now or I order in the summer, it may not be until 2024, early 2024, that I actually get the fish. But that's fine, because I've got lots to do. I've got all those safety measures to put in. I've got other things to do in the garden as well. And I can feed the rudd on a bit and see if I can get some growth out of the rudd, which I spoke about in a community post. So that's my plan, to get those carp, and I think that'll be really good. Now, incidentally, in the video I made about my plans for 2023, which was before any of my fish had died, I was thinking of doing a year in the life of the pond, to do quite a lot of videoing with my new GoPro and seeing how the environment changes, how the fish's behavior change, and all sorts of interesting things throughout the whole 12 months of a pond. And I'm still going to do that, but I'm going to do that from the day I get my new carp, whenever that is, whether that's soon, whether that's in the autumn, whether that's beginning of next year. I'll start it from there, and then a year later I'll release the video. So long-term project, but that's something I want to do. And so there will be a lot going on in the pond, because as I said, I've got to make the pond ready for the new fish whenever they may come, and I will be releasing videos until the point, even if it's over the next year. There's lots to make. There's lots of discussion videos I want to make, documentary videos I want to make, documenting the work, documenting how the rudd go through the year. Now, this is one idea for all the people who are still watching. Thank you. This is one idea I've had, and I'm 50-50 about doing it. Now, I may have mentioned for my birthday in January, again, before I knew my fish had died, I was given a 50-litre bag of K1 micro. Now, as you know, it's really expensive. Well, it's about 80 quid. That's really expensive to me. And I had this plan. I'm on about 560 odd subscribers. I'd quite like to get to 1,000 subscribers. And I thought, that's not happening anytime soon. That might happen over the next 2 or 3 years, but it's not happening anytime soon. And I thought, what would tempt people to subscribe? What would get people recommending the channel and encouraging their mates? Well, I think a 50-litre bag of K1 micro might do that. And I thought I could offer that. So when I get to 1,000 subscribers, I'll give this bag away. I'll even pay postage. And I thought that's a super idea. Because, there's more to getting monetized than 1,000 subscribers. You've got to have the views. So I'd have to put out some more output and make it watchable. But, I know some people who are, only at like 1,100 subscribers and don't put out that many videos, and they're still making sort of 10 or 15 quid a month from it, which, would pay for that bag of K1 in 6 months or so. So, it's a slightly no risk idea. I think I'm more likely to do it if I have to wait till, next winter for my car. I'm quite likely to. So tell me what you think about that. Do you think it's actually going to make that much of a difference that I might get to 1,000 subscribers? But that's my idea anyway. Let me know what you think. No guarantees. So do subscribe, but don't subscribe just because you think I'm differently doing it. But subscribe, because then you might find out if I am. God, I feel a little bit duplicitous and very YouTubey in this moment. Anyway, that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, or at least I've let you know what I'm doing. I've failed on videos again. I've been doing so much stuff around the house. You may have seen a video if you follow me on Instagram. I completely redid our garage and made it all organised, and I'm now doing the downstairs toilet, decorating that, and then I've got to make a desk for an office. So all of that, but I am going to be doing more with the pond as we get out of winter and as I start to try and make the pond more secure. So there will be more videos, promise. And yeah, so I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.